Hey guys, it's Kennedy. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kennedy. I'm a 23-year-old mom to an almost 5-year-old son named Kian, and I started this channel when I found out I was pregnant with him in high school. For today's video, I'm going to be talking about my labor and delivery story, what really went down. I did vlog it. It was almost 5 years ago. I decided to do a labor and delivery story, but like an updated version of what actually happened, because I did vlog it at the time, but I did hide a lot of things and I did leave a lot of details out because of the fact that I was in a very abusive relationship. I do still have those videos up, so you guys are welcome to go watch them. I will link them below. However, I do want to say that I don't want any harassment going out to my child's biological father. He's living his own life, doing his own things. There's a lot of reasonings behind the separation and the fact that he's not in Kian's life, and I don't want anybody giving him any kind of hate for it, because you don't know the true story. However, I do want to go over all the details about what actually went down during my labor and delivery and give you kind of a behind the scenes of that, since it's been almost 5 years, and it's insane that it's been 5 years since I've been pregnant, and it's crazy. Well, like I said, I found out I was pregnant when I was 17. I do have a couple videos talking about that. I will link them below. But anyway, so it was January 3rd, like in the morning, and I was wanting to film the Baby Mama Dance Challenge, which I will insert a clip of that because I did film and post that on my YouTube. As you could tell, I was very large. My due date was January 9th, and at this point in time, it was January 3rd. And a day before that, I had actually gone to the hospital thinking I was in labor because I was having some Braxton Hicks contractions, and I did lose my mucus plug, but it was extremely watery and it like covered my pants entirely. So I thought that maybe it was my water breaking. I had not known what that would have been like prior, so I had no idea what that would have been like, and it seemed as if it was my water breaking, so I went in. They ended up, I spent like about 3 hours at the hospital, and they ended up determining that it wasn't my water breaking, it was just my mucus plug, so they sent me back home. Anyway, so the next day, it's January 3rd, and I filmed the Baby Mama Dance Challenge, and that night when I went to bed, I woke up like probably at least 10, 15, maybe even 20 times with the worst cramps in my life. It felt like period cramps to a 10. Like, it was horrible. I was in so much pain, and I wasn't focusing on when they were coming and what was going on because I was half asleep. It was the middle of the night. So then that next morning, I was actually going to have my 39-week checkup. I had called my mom and asked if she was able to take me. My appointment was at like 12 o'clock, and so my mom came over and she was sitting with me for a little bit. And at this time, I was living with my baby daddy's family. My family was in the middle of moving, and I didn't want to move away from my family, but my baby daddy, the situation, he kind of made me because it was rough, and it was not a good relationship, and it was not okay. But anyway, so you're so cute. Anyway, so we decided to live with my baby daddy's family for a little bit while my family transitioned into moving. It was a rough time to be pregnant. I was having like those horrible contractions the whole morning, and so I didn't want to drive myself, and I asked my mom to drive me to my appointment that day. She came over, she picked me up, and on the way there, she was like, "We're gonna go right to the hospital." And I was like, "What? Why?" And she was like, "Kennedy, I'm pretty sure you're in labor." And I was like, "Really?" And she's like, "You're having contractions, I can tell, and they're about 1 to 2 minutes apart, and they last for about 60 seconds. That's the sign of labor, like pretty soon labor." She drove to the front of the hospital and had me walk in. At this time, my baby daddy was at work, and so we were trying to get a hold of him, but he was working, so we couldn't. So anyway, my mom dropped me off at the front of the hospital, and I walked inside on my own, and I went to the front desk, and they could tell I was in pain. And I was like, "I think I'm in labor. Where is the OB section of the hospital?" So they pointed me to the right direction. I went to the front and I told them I think I was in labor. I was having contractions 1 to 2 minutes apart. And so they started the whole process of getting me checked in. I could tell that they were going really slow with it and not really believing me, because a couple days prior I had gone in for the same thing. So it was kind of probably thinking that it was just another labor scare when it actually wasn't me in labor. So I could tell they weren't taking me very seriously. I was really young, and the staff that was working at the front desk just was not very nice to me. But anyway, besides the point, they got me to a room and they started monitoring my contractions, and they came in and were gonna see how dilated I was. And when I tell you, that hurts so bad. Everything about labor is going to be painful, but when they're checking how dilated you are, I don't know what it is, but when my OB would do it, he was always super gentle. But when it's like a female nurse checking how dilated I was, it hurt like a mother. Oh my God. So she checked how dilated I was. And this was after like an hour of being in the hospital, and I was sitting there having my contractions. I was getting a little annoyed because no one was coming in to check on me, and my mom was getting annoyed because no one was coming in to check on me. And she goes, "Oh, you're at a 5. We need to get you upstairs and get you something to eat so we could get your epidural going, because it could be soon." That nurse that checked me was so nice, and once she found out how far along I was, she was like, "Oh, honey, I'm sorry, you're really in pain. Let's get you upstairs, it's time." And so they made me walk like upstairs, and I was getting so pissed off at them because I was hurting so bad. But I know that walking up the stairs was going to be helpful because, you know, helps to get things going, get the baby down. And he was a stubborn ass kid. Like, he would not come out. But anyway, we'll get there. So they finally get me to my room, and nothing sounded good as far as food. I didn't want to eat when my stomach was hurting, but I needed to so I could have the energy to get him out of me. By this point, it's like evening time on January 3rd. It's like 5, 6 o'clock. So it's like when I tell you we spent hours there before they finally got me admitted. Okay.
So like when it gets like to the...
I'll come get you in, okay? So by this time, my baby daddy was there, and he had been asked to step out of the room while I got my epidural. I was freshly 18. I was not really sure what I was doing, and I was very nervous. So I wanted my mom to be with me, and that's how it went down. So while I was doing the epidural, they have you turn and sit on the very edge of the bed and curl your back like this. And I literally had a contraction come when they were putting the needle in my back, and it was extremely, extremely painful because you're not allowed to move a single centimeter or you could literally potentially become paralyzed. Like, it's the epidural thing is actually, as much as it helped and I was able to get some sleep, it sucked big time. So anyway, besides the point, once I get that epidural, I get to rest, and I am resting for so long. I slept the whole entire night. It was the next morning, still wasn't getting anywhere in progress, and not getting to where we were getting close at all. And so by this point, it's the next night, 24 hours later, I'm in the hospital for an entire day. It's getting to where they're starting to worry if maybe they need to have a C-section because he's just not descending. At this point, my epidural was starting to wear off because it had been so long. And I was wanting to know why I couldn't start pushing. He was getting to where he was not descending enough, and it was rough. And I felt like there was something wrong with me, and the doctor came in and gave me a lot of reassurance. I ended up finding out that my OB was out of town that one specific weekend I went into labor. So I was very upset that my original OB that was with me from the beginning couldn't be there with me. It was very upsetting. I was super sad. And I was starting to feel like there was something wrong with me, like maybe I was weak or not strong enough to be able to get this baby out. And so they came in, they talked to me, and they told me that right now he's fine. I'm having all these contractions because he is starting to make his way down, but the process was taking so long. And unfortunately, sometimes that just happens. And they were telling me that they were gonna break my water soon. So at like 8 o'clock at night on January 4th, they did come in and break my water, and then I got to rest for a little bit longer. At about 10 o'clock that night, it was time to push. I was finally at a 10. Breaking the water really helped him get down a lot further. So I started pushing, and we weren't sure how soon he was going to come out. He could have been a January 4th birthday or a January 5th birthday, or he could have even been like the midnight baby, the first baby born on January 5th, which would have been really cool and probably would have made the newspaper. So we were all getting our hopes up, really excited about that. And about 2 hours in of pushing, he was not making any progress coming out. And I was getting extremely frustrated. I was exhausted. I was sweaty. I was crying. I was hyperventilating because I was so beyond exhausted. So I took a break and went back to bed for about an hour. And then an hour later, they woke me up. They said, let's try it again. So I pushed for another 4 hours. 4 hours I pushed. And the reason that he was starting to not want to come out very well was because my pelvic bone, instead of being shaped like this, like how it should be, mine was shaped like this. So I have a very narrow pelvic bone, and it makes it very hard for him to fit through. So he was sitting like right here for a very long time. I'm still pushing, we're still trying, and he's finally crowning all of a sudden. And at this point, I was pushing with only nurses. I didn't have the OB in the room because it was a long pushing process. So he decided to go take a nap is what they told me, which is kind of funny. But anyway, my child is not listening. Holy Spirit, activate. Like here to crowning in like 2 minutes, all of a sudden he just shot through. So we were not prepared for that, and they had to go find the OB. So they told me to hold him there, and they said, don't push, we need to get the doctor in here, because once, he comes out, this is for his job. At that point, he was naturally coming out. The easiest way I could explain what it felt like was if you're literally halfway through a poop and if you were to try to like suck it back in, as TMI as that is literally what it felt like. Like he was right there. You could feel his head, you could see his head, and it was painful as hell having this giant thing coming out of me. Anyway, so at this point he is crowning, and the funny part is about that whole time before I was pushing, where I was just laying in bed in pain, my baby daddy was playing a video game. He had hooked up his Xbox and was playing it the whole time. And I was so frustrated, but I was not allowed to say anything because he was exhausted and tired. He was tired and exhausted, so he was wanting to play the game because we're not making any progress. Dad, don't watch this video. So finally the OB comes in, and I was able to finally get him out. So they clean him up, they put him on my chest. He cried right away, so there's no issues with that. So then they are cleaning me up. I push out the placenta, and that was painful too because, yeah. Anyway, and then they need to stitch me up, and unfortunately the only reason I ripped was because of how long I had to hold Kian in crowning. So they did have to stitch me up. It was only like 1 or 2 stitches. So they didn't numb me. So that was painful as hell. That hurt. It was a whole needle going through my cooch after I just pushed a kid out. So that sucked. And then one thing nobody tells you about labor is that your contractions don't stop once the baby's out. Because now that you've gotten the baby out, your uterus is going to contract back to where it was beforehand. And it sucks. After a little while, they come in and they are teaching me how to breastfeed. And I don't know what was going on, but the lactation consultant was a bitch. She was telling me I'm holding him wrong. She was like getting very frustrated with me because I didn't know how to slip my nipple into his mouth the right way to get him to breastfeed. I was getting extremely pissed off, and it was so frustrating, and I was crying, and my mom was crying because I was crying, and I was so upset. Eventually I get him to latch, and it's to the point where she's like, okay, good, he's latching well, and she goes, and then after he's done, he falls asleep. So we take him, we wrap him back up and put him in the little crib, baby bed. What do you call those things that they keep them in after? I don't know. I am then asked to try and go to the bathroom so that they can move me up to the recovery and the regular room that I would stay in the next couple days before we go home from the hospital. And I could not walk. I was extremely swollen. They said that it was likely because of how long I had to hold him in crowning. I could not get up on my own. And so I had to be helped, and the nurses kept saying, you had him naturally, right? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, then why can't you walk? And I was crying. I was upset because everybody they were not very sensitive to the fact that I had just pushed a child out of me, and I was very exhausted. I'm walking like this to the bathroom because I can't even close my legs because I'm so incredibly swollen and hurting. So they are helping me get to the bathroom, and I sit down, and I'm sitting there for 5 minutes and I can't pee. And the nurse that was there, at this point it was about 6:30 in the morning, so they were about to switch shifts anyway, with the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. nurses. And so this nurse is like sitting here like, okay, well, you need to try. Are you pushing it all? Like, let's go. And so I start sobbing because I can't pee. And she finally was like, you know what? It's fine. It's okay. Just get back in the wheelchair. We'll take you to the room. And at this point, my mom was not in the room with me, because if my mom was in the room with me, she would have screamed at this nurse for talking to me like that. It was very upsetting. So they get me in the wheelchair. They hand me Kian, and they're taking me up to the recovery room. I get back in there, and we're all good. We're all set. And at this point, my mom goes home to take a shower and pick up my dad and my sister so that they could come see Kian. And so things were awesome. And at this point, my baby daddy was getting very frustrated because he was exhausted, apparently. And so he decided he was going to go home for the night and go to the gym. So I let him. I had just pushed the baby out, couldn't even walk, and I let him go home. And I made up excuses to all the nurse and all the people that came and saw me that he was just going home to grab more stuff because I was embarrassed and sad. I cried half the night, the first night, because I was exhausted and I was by myself. And I was very sad that I was alone. And I think it was kind of a sign for me to be like, okay, I can tell I'm going to be doing a lot of this motherhood thing by myself. And it was very lonely and emotional that night. It was very sad. Flash forward to the next day, my baby daddy finally came back, and then my mom and my dad and my sister came that day, and they wanted me to just get some rest, which is why they didn't come the day before. Everybody came and saw Kian. It was great. It was amazing. I'll insert some pictures of them holding him for the first time. And then I had asked my baby daddy if he could help me take a shower, and he said no. He said he didn't want to. He was playing on his phone, and so he didn't want to do that because he was busy on his phone or whatever. And so my mom said she'd do it, and so my mom helped me take a shower. I couldn't do it on my own, so my mom had to shower me. I decided to stay an extra night in the hospital, but my baby daddy wouldn't let me. So that day we did go home. It was in the afternoon. We got ready, and I did have to get wheelchaired out because I couldn't walk very good. The nurses were not super confident in letting me go home, but I kept insisting because my baby daddy kept insisting. He told me that if I can't figure it out on my own, then what was the point of having a kid? It was not fun. It was very difficult. I would have loved to get to stay another night because I couldn't walk on my own or even pick him up quite well yet. So the first couple days at home were extremely difficult. So my mom stayed home with me a lot, and he went back to work the day that we got home. My baby daddy did. So it was rough, but I ended up having a beautiful, beautiful child. He was super healthy, happy, and there were no complications as far as that goes. And then besides the swelling I had and just the typical labor recovery, I didn't have any complications either. So it was amazing. And I can't say I wouldn't change anything. I really wish that I would have gotten out of the relationship I was in prior, but who knows if it would have got me where I am today without it. So I like to take everything with a grain of salt and see everything as a blessing. So that is my labor and delivery story, unfiltered, uncovered. If there's anything I left out that you guys have questions on, you can definitely ask these questions down below. I didn't want to go into too much detail about my relationship because at the time a lot of it's a blur. It was really bad. There are a lot of things that I still have panic and anxiety attacks about. So trying to talk about it can be rather difficult, but I did want to do an updated video of that just because it had been almost 5 years, and looking back on it, there were a lot of things that I did leave out as far as what was going on behind the scenes. So anyway, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate it so much, and thank you to those who have been here since my original story that I shared. You guys are amazing. I appreciate it so much, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Bye, guys.